All right, Mr. Chris Senkbile, producer, shareholder, risk advisor, Insurtech extraordinaire. How we doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I can't live up to that intro, but I'm doing well. It's good
I
to
don't
see
know
you
about
guys.
that. Come on, that's all true. It's all true.
Yeah, you rose-colored glasses, I think, to some degree, but we try hard, that's for sure.
He's
Hey,
good
that's
at
all we can do.
patronizing, Chris. You just gotta ignore him.
Well, you gotta pump up the guests a little bit, Ryan. Come on.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm excited for this one. We've got you on to talk about kind of that optimal tech stack in an agency, right? And as I mentioned in that beautiful intro, you do have a couple different lenses that you're able to view this in the industry, right? You are a producer. You're actively working on bringing on new clients, managing client relationships. You help in some leadership roles in the firm. And then as well as, being the founder of Ferro and what you guys are doing on the Insurtech side. So that's where I'm excited to kind of get those different lenses throughout this conversation. I know you see a lot of different, you have views into a lot of different tech in general, right? And so let's just kind of, maybe I'll start there on what your perspective on Insurtech. I think we talked the last time you were on about this, but I'm curious if that's changed a bit. Just what are we experiencing right now? February 28th, 2023.
Yeah, good question. I think it's a lot up in the air, to be honest. I think one thing is true, everybody's scrambling to try and figure it out. And I think there's this desire to have a silver bullet, the switch was on, we're gonna flip it on and everything's gonna be good. And you guys know as well as I do, like that's just not a reality, right? Like there's some painful bits between current state, future state, and how you get there. So one thing that's really kind of set in, I think, with a lot of the folks I've been talking with and in the last 3 or 4 months is really around trying to figure out how to connect the ideal bits and bring them together inside an ideal agency tech stack, right? So, hey, we really like this piece of this solution, and we really like this piece of this solution, and how do we actually bring those in, connect them, kind of democratize that data to a degree so it can flow where we want it to go and kind of build it for our ideal use case. And that's, I think, really consistent right now. The question mark though is how, and I think that's where everybody's kind of at. So it kind of feels like there's like this certain level of like people being paralyzed in that too, because it's like, oh gosh, like we see what we like, but we're just not quite sure how to get there. And so there's almost like a little lull, it feels like, in the evaluation of all these different solutions and how you get from A to B. So that seems like a really kind of consistent thing right now from like the technical perspective. From a brokerage perspective, I think we probably largely fit in that same boat, evaluating a lot of different resources and trying to figure out like how we get to optimization on those resources in as short a time period as we can. And I think that's it. The other big question mark is for a brokerage is, hey, if we use this technology, will it actually be able to interface well with our other technical solutions? Mine always does that too. If I don't move enough, over here
drives me nuts. I don't know why I haven't had the maintenance guy Ryan fix it yet, but
come on, Ryan.
I'm just waiting for you to get carpal tunnel. So when you
well, so talk about that from the brokerage perspective a little bit. Like, how should we be viewing or analyzing the need to bring on a new piece of tech?
I think your first litmus test is simply, is any technology set up to integrate, interface, and play well in the sandbox with other tech? And if it's not, it falls way to the bottom of the list, in my opinion. I think that is step number one, because this is, and you guys are in this space, right? It's such a big, complex space. Any one company saying, hey, we can do it all, can't. And we know this, right? And that's why all these different kind of point solutions exist. But that's also what creates the problem of how do we get them all connected, right? So it's kind of a, a self-fulfilling prophecy there to some degree in that regard. But I think easy first check is, can this connect with other resources or not? And if it can't, like, move on to the next one. And I think that a lot of that comes down to founders, like to actual leadership at, some of them just take the mentality of like, we're going to own, the insurance world someday and our way or the highway, and we're not going to, connect with others. And I think you're seeing a lot of brokerages push them to the side right now in favor of, hey, I know for sure, like this founder is desirous to just elevate the industry together and work together. And so, we're seeing, I think a lot of brokerages lean in that direction because they know at some point they don't want to be 5 years down the road with a solution and have all their data locked down just like it is today, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
I'd be curious to see where the two big AMS systems take this, Applied and Vertafore, and just because those solutions were the solution for so long, and I think that has shifted, but I'm not sure those business models have shifted. They're still very expensive. They still, want to be more than they probably are good at, and instead of leaning into what you're good at. And so we'll see kind of where all that goes. And if, they become a point solution in the stack as they should be, along with and play nice with everything else that's out there that, can work together. And so,
little bits of progress there, it seems like, or at least they claim.
At least they claim that's
at least they claim. I've seen like, tidbits where it seems like, oh, this is a little different or a little better than it was even 12 months ago. So I think they're trying. I think it's just that it comes down to their revenue model, and you kind of, shoot yourself in the foot on the existing rev model by going too hard in that direction. So it will be interesting to see. I do know though, like, and we can get into kind of top to bottom or bottom to top in terms of ideal stack, but I do think one thing that's consistently true is a lot of the folks I'm talking to are actively trying to figure out what it looks like to live outside of a world of either Vertafore or Applied. Building their own AMS, leveraging an AMS that's been built in Salesforce already, or some combination of all of the above. And I think there's pros and cons to both. Probably the biggest challenge there is just the overall change management, the organizational inertia on, hey, we've been using this system for 30 plus years. What's it even look like to kind of maneuver towards something different? But I think that on the democratization piece, that's where those new kind of AMS systems in a Salesforce or whatever other tech stack, enable that for a brokerage. So I think that's where they're starting to really lean into that. And I think you're going to start seeing market share start to fall a little bit with those two. I mean, it's not going to be a ton overnight, but I think little by little, there's new entrants coming in trying to help answer the question called by brokers. So
yeah, for sure. And I think, one of the things with those that, and if you're a broker agency out there, you need to be thinking about this differently. In the past, you almost had to think within the limits of your system, right? Because you did everything in there. So it's almost like the way you did business was dictated by how the system did business. That has changed significantly. There are still some things that's the case too, but ask yourself why. Like, why are we doing this? And if that is taking a significant amount of time, energy, effort, or not allowing you to drive the experience you want to drive to your client, there's probably a solution out there for that. Now, that may not integrate directly with your AMS, or you may have to think about things differently from that perspective, but you can usually get it done. You got to think outside of the current AMS that you're using and put that in the box in which you need to use it. No different than any of these other systems, right? Too often it's still looked at as like, that's the cornerstone piece. We're spending so much money on it that we got to use it for everything, or as much as they say it can be used for, when in reality, like Applied System has or Epic has an opportunities function to do and manage your pipeline. Like, it's not good. Like, there are better solutions out there, right? I hope it's better someday. Like, I hope they improve it, right? Because it would make a ton of sense. But right now it's not where it needs to be. And so if that's something you need, and you need to track data and have visibility into it, like, there are tons of systems out there that can do that, right? So think about that differently as you're going through this process of designing and building out your tech stack, because there are so many solutions out there that are really, really good at handling that piece that you need, right?
To
Which I
Chris's
think-
point, though.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Sorry, Chris. I mean, that's what gets difficult, right? Is
Oh, yeah.
ideally you want everything in one spot, but you're not getting what you need. So you're like, okay, well, we got to start piecing these solutions together. And before you know it, you got, you have your documents in one place, you have your emails in another, and you've got 100 different systems and none of them communicate to each other. And it's like, there's got to be a higher level analysis almost to figure out, your biggest pain points, or doing both, right? I think that's an opportunity as well, is continuing down the path of doing things the way that you're doing right now, and then trying these solutions in the background and see if you can build them together to get comfortable to, take the leap and like get rid of a piece of tech that you're not happy with. But I mean, that's ultimately the issue that we're struggling with.
Well, I talked to a guy the other day. He was actually a former brokerage CFO, and he was kind of, breaking down the way he thought about things for his brokerage. And I thought it was a helpful conversation, but he basically said, we allocate cost, on the P&L to basically 5 buckets. Let's say, there's overhead, there's software, there's producer costs, kind of third-party resources like Apatra or Resource Pro or something like that, right? And like kind of have these buckets. And what's challenging is, to your point, Ryan, like the AMS charge item on the software cost is easily the biggest line item from a software perspective. And so it's tough for a brokerage when they're trying to think about all these different systems or resources to step back and say, okay, yeah, we're going to take on these additional costs that, our AMS system is telling us they should already be able to do for us, right? But maybe not very well. And so it's like this mental hurdle to get over. So then the question is, how do you like frame that as a broker, in your head of, okay, we're going to deploy, certain amount of, cost towards these different resources while we've got this big drain on the big ticket item. So for me, then I think it comes down to, man, yours is on a short timer too.
Dude,
I think mine's like 15 minutes.
No, it's like 5.
If I fall asleep at my desk, if I fall asleep for, then that's when it happens in my office. Not quite as quick.
Yeah, no, it's way too quick. One time I was on here and I went to do that and I knocked over a water and it went everywhere in the middle of a show. It was not fun.
I love it. But I think that's where what's interesting is then like reframing it for a brokerage and thinking about where you are trying to bring value, right? And where we bring value is with our clients. Like that's our job. We drive value there. So I think kind of starting there, if you're looking at, hey, we've got 101 resources we could use, right? Well, it's like, okay, what actually fuels the people who fuel us, right? And then going from there kind of upstream. And I think that's where then as a brokerage, you're kind of put squarely in that position of, okay, well, I'm going to incur this additional expense for whatever resources they are, but hopefully it's because I'm serving my clients better. I think that's actually a bigger mental hurdle for a lot of brokerages to get to, I think, than I probably would have ever anticipated. Because I think there's still that, like, we're all human, like, well, yeah, but what's it mean for me? Like, what's it mean for our internal operation, and that becomes the focus, not, hey, what's it mean for my client's operation,
For sure. So let's work our way back then. Let's start. We've talked a lot about the AMS. So what have you seen out there? What AMS system in particular do you would recommend? You could, however you want to approach that, like large agency, small agency, or just run the gamut.
Yeah, and you guys are familiar, obviously. I think small agencies, it seems like Better Agency is really making some.
Yeah, they're doing some cool stuff.
Yeah, some cool stuff there. So, big proponent of those guys. I think for your kind of middle-sized agencies, a buddy of mine up in I think it's Ohio. I'm probably gonna say that wrong now, but borrowed time times TYME. But they've got a really slick solution there that I think has a lot of potential, a lot of good. It's helps bring sales and ops into the same environment, which imagine that, like, what a crazy concept, right?
Yeah.
So I like what they're doing for sure. I think there's others out there depending on, but I think that's probably the two that come to mind, right off bat, that seem to be getting a lot of traction. And then, for the large, I think there's a lot of brokerages who are like, hey, we're just going to go build our own inside of, Salesforce Financial Cloud or, whatever it is, and make this thing the way we want it, which is fine. There's just why recreate the wheel if you don't have to some degree too, if there's other, resources out there. So,
yeah, you're seeing a lot more of that, like broker tech, or whatever you want to call it. It's just, it's expensive, but when you look at what some of these systems cost and things, like, you can make the case pretty quick to go out and build it exactly the way you want it and build it on top of Salesforce or something like that, but
yeah, well, and that's the thing. I mean, Salesforce is structured such that you kind of a low code sort of environment. You can go in and really customize it to your internal flow if you want to.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So then that's AMS system, to kind of manage once we have the client, but let's think about like client experience. Any systems that, you have found that really impact the client experience when it comes to how they purchase insurance, how they interact with the agency on the service side or on the sales side that, specifically impacts that experience?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch out there, and I think it depends on kind of segment there. Is it small commercial, middle market, large market? Because the use case is different, right? I mean, it just is. It's small commercial is just a entirely different kind of flow. Not so much for us, like it's still a lift to market those accounts and get them on board and everything. But in terms of their kind of expectations, need, just the quantity of data and, kind of volume, small versus large is just different. So I think there's a lot of small commercial solutions out there that I think are really, really, really slick from a digital marketing perspective, that folks are using. Actually, a cohort member that we went through BTV with, Xylo, doing some really good things in that regard. Obviously, you've got the bold penguins out there in the world that I think still are doing great things. And then I think from a middle, and that's probably more your kind of small commercial, smaller size brokerage. But I think for the middle size, I think honestly, the best that I've seen out there, to be entirely truthful, is Launch, in terms of what you guys are doing with that just acquisition perspective, and how do we actually filter new prospect through a kind of a structured flow towards onboarding, right? And actually bringing them in brokerage. So I don't think there's a lot of solutions out there that even get close to any structure around that process. I think every broker and or brokerage is up to their own kind of figuring that out.
Yeah.
So love what you guys are doing there on that front. And then from there, after the kind of the that really qualification process is what I like to think of it as. Is this a qualified customer or not? We've taken them through. Then I think it just comes down to data capture being that next big lift for the insured to kind of engage with. And I think there's a number of resources out there that are continuing to kind of grow into that space. To a degree. Obviously, you've got the broker Buddhas of the world out there on kind of applications. You've got
Ferro.
You've got Ferro, who's trying to lean into that space and figure it out. But that's a big hairy thing too, because every insured, as similar as they are, is dissimilar, and there's specific unique use cases, right? And how do you create structure around those kind of one-offs and facilitate that too? So but yeah, I think that's where, if I'm a brokerage, if I'm running a brokerage, I'm starting client first and layering up from there. Because at that point, if I can start there and I have free flow of that data, that information, right, then I can start layering on top of it resources that continue to allow that data to filter through and route to wherever it needs to go, right? Either internally at the brokerage, externally. But that's definitely where I would start, which is tough because right now that's a kind of a completely
Where
different way
nobody
to think
focuses.
about it. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Brat, you've talked about that. Like, none of us have a business if we don't get out and bring on new clients into said business, right? So we all want to start with like, oh, let's get all the solutions in place for, managing client relationships. Well, how many client relationships do you have? Well, we're just getting started,
Yeah.
So, well, like you said, let's start with what kind of an experience or whatnot that you want to drive, then start to figure out what's the optimal solutions I need in place to drive that and to bring on those clients.
Yeah, all you really have to do is, like, understand your client's problems, solve those problems, and then have a phenomenal feedback system, right? Meet with
Yes.
them and have a conversation and ask them what they like and what they don't like and what you need. And if you do that over and over again, everything else is going to take care of itself. Your back end is going to be built perfectly because you're going to be responding to the needs and the problems that your current clients face. And if you build your operations and your systems around that, you got a shot. I think far too often I mean, Ellie and I, like he said, we talk about this and we struggle with, shoot, we're witnessing another firm right now. They're building out their health and benefits department, and they want to start really diving into the operational side and figuring out a great operational model and client experience with a dozen clients. It's like triple your client count, and then you will end up with an ideal operational backend.
It's the old, I think you guys have had him on, and I'm totally blanking. Feedback marketing.
Dan Allison.
Dan Allison.
Dan.
Exactly.
It's that whole model, and I think it's interesting, like the whole brokerage community. I think sometimes we just forget about that reality of like taking customer feedback and then actually doing something with it. Because I think we were always able to. I think it like kind of like unfortunate to some degree, but we're able to pass the buck. Well, it's the insurance companies. They're such a pain in the butt, and then we don't have to like actually address anything because there's always that scapegoat over there.
Yeah.
That's their fault, whatever. So I think it's
true.
Super interesting though on the feedback piece, because like when you're building technology, right? And you guys are doing that. When you're building technology, all you do is listen, right?
Mhm.
It's listen, take it back to the drawing board, listen some more, take it back to the drawing board. And we don't do that with our clients sometimes in the brokerage world. And it's kind of interesting to me. And I think there's a push for that. I think it's going to continue to kind of evolve in that direction where that call is going to have to get answered, or clients are going to go somewhere else that they can, have their needs met, more fully.
Well, this wave is coming, where there are a lot of newer agencies starting up, or there are a lot of producers inside larger agencies that are seeing the light of, there was this old scapegoat of like, we're relying on the insurance carriers and we have to rely on them because they have certain processes and they have certain ways that we have to go about business. So our entire value proposition was centered around the insurance carrier, right? The renewal, the audit,
Yep.
whatever it is, the claim, however they handle them, like the entire thing. And that's all stuff still all has to happen, and it has to happen on the carrier's timeline. But the good agents and firms out there are starting to say, that's great, but that's not going to be the value I drive for my client.
Yep.
So they're setting up their own experiences. They're setting up their own timelines of services that are outside of the insurance or delivering the insurance policy, right? Somebody, I don't know if we had him on the podcast or I heard him talking, but like years ago, it was value. An independent agent had value in just bringing multiple options to somebody and saying, hey, here's, 5 different options for your insurance. Let's talk about which one might fit the most. That there was value in that because the buyer couldn't go out and do their own research, right? There wasn't the internet, or it was difficult to figure out what other options are out there. That has all gone away. Like, again, that still needs to happen, but that's not value to the client. They can get that anywhere, right? And they can do research anywhere on that stuff. And so this wave of folks looking at it from the client experience perspective and shifting this dynamic away from the insurance carrier kind of having all the power in that is, I mean, I would argue it's already here. It's just how quickly will it kind of become the norm? You know, again, if you're sitting back and still in this old model, like, it's going to catch up to you. You're going to start to see and feel this a lot more.
The way we try to,
go ahead.
Sorry, I thought you're done.
Go ahead.
The way that we try to sum that up is just simply value compression. I mean, that's what it is, because we don't control our how our Benjamins hit the bank account yet. So like, the only thing that we can do is fight this. Okay, well, let's add more value to the client then. That's how we're going to differentiate ourselves. Which, if you think about that logically, like, there's an end to that road, because you can't be all things to all people. You can't create custom experiences and custom processes for each individual client. Like, you can't scale that way. It's like, that's the conundrum ultimately that you got to have tech help you solve. And there's a lot more that goes into that, right? Your target client, who are you chasing? And can you find a common theme with systems and tech that you can surround those clients with, that can help solve some of the problems that they have? And then, as we mentioned earlier, like, get nails on the issues or your expectations that the clients have of your service and your value, and dial that in and be nimble and be willing to change it as we continue to go down the road of value compression, until ultimately we can have control of our revenue. And at that point, like, it gives us another lever. You might be able to go back upstream, but until then, like, here we are.
So here's an interesting concept. So the 80-20 rule, right? Because you brought something up. It's like, well, if we can just automate all of our clients, then, you know, eventually there's no need for a broker, because we're just automating the flow, right? Which we all know isn't the case. Like, every middle large market customer reaffirms the fact that they want their broker involved, right? But if you can automate the 80, right, the very consistent flow that allows you to spend more time on the 20, those unique accounts that need more service, need more support, need more solution solving, whatever it is, right? I think that's where if I'm a brokerage, that's what I'm thinking about, is how do I automate? I know I'm never going to capture everything in a bucket, because it's just impossible. There's too much variability on certain types of risks and exposures and all those things. But if I can capture the 80 and really automate as much of that as possible, it's going to free me up, hopefully, to go spend time on those other 20 that just are very kind of, you know, square peg round hole type deals that just take a little bit more work and oversight. And I think that's, you know, I think instead of waiting for the silver bullet is my point on that, because it's just not going to come where it's like, oh man, everything is perfect. You got to start with, okay, can this capture 80%, allows me to work on the 20, and we can grow into, you know, other solutions over time.
I think that's a spot on way to look at it. And I would add something onto that in regards to the 20, and this is something I get super passionate about, because we're not thinking about this from a client experience perspective enough, right? So allowing you to focus on that 20, like let's say we have a lot of these clients, and if firms have been around for any length of time, you know, you've got clients that have been with you 10, 15, 20 years, right? Well, those are good relationships, and they may never have gone out and looked at somebody else that's doing innovative things, right? Or maybe they did, and they got a quote here, they got a quote there, because most of the time they're not really looking. And so a lot of times we can get lazy with those accounts, right? They're on autopilot, they're doing great, like we don't have to worry about them. But think about what happens if you're not the one bringing them new value, and you're not the one thinking about these different things that you should be to improve their experience. What happens when somebody does? Right. So I'm not talking about bringing a new carrier to them for a cheaper price that they're just going to come back to you and say, hey, I saved 15% by that guy. Why don't you, take that to my current carrier and make it better. Like somebody says, hey, I'm introducing this solution to you called Ferro that's going to allow you to do this, 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 and this, and make your life that much easier. And they're like, holy crap, I didn't even know this was possible, and all of a sudden they're questioning your relationship. Like, why haven't you brought me something like this? Like you're not going to recover from that. It's going to be, that will break relationships so fast. And that's where I say this wave is coming. Like that's the type of stuff that if you're not protecting those 20%, which is probably driving 80% of your revenue, by the way,
Right.
Those are the ones that you really do need to be bringing new value to. Because if you automate and you screw up one of the smaller ones, like none of us want to do that, obviously, but that's not going to sink your business.
Yep.
You don't consistently think about it and bring value to these ones that have probably trusted you for a long time. And you've probably, if you're being honest with yourself, taken advantage of that trust to a degree.
Yep.
Somebody's going to bring the thing that they want or need that they didn't even know existed. They weren't even questioning. Right.
Yep.
And it's like, if we would have asked, people back in the day, if they needed a car or what do they need? They said a faster horse, right? They wouldn't have said, I need a car. And like, we changed that dynamic. And so that's what's happening right now. And we get super passionate about this because we want all of you out there listening to start to question this and start to think about, what do I need to be bringing my clients? Like Ryan said, understand their problems, go out and figure out how to solve those problems. You do that consistently, you're going to win every day.
And it puts you as a salesperson in a different echelon as a trusted advisor, right? That's, you guys talk about that all the time, is now we're talking about C-suite things that the C-suite cares about, right? Placement, covering risk, insurance, like all that kind of stuff is got it, good to go.
Yeah.
Lights, hold on, lights back on. But that's
For those listening, my light keeps turning off. If you haven't picked that up.
No, it's just Elliot having light bulb moments every like
he's actually plugged into the grid.
Yeah.
You can tell when he starts to doze off during a podcast because the lights start to dim.
I gotta shake a little bit and then
he's not telling our guests that they're boring. Like, that's definitely not.
No, we have derailed.
Real quick, I mean, holy crap, Elliot. You finally brought a little value, and I think we're gonna trademark relationship breaker.
Yeah, that's nice.
Right? Like, because that's,
and we just did, right? I mean, it's recorded.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get it to our attorneys, and if anybody wants to come after us, we'll have the letter ready to go. So relationship breaker, like that's the kind of stuff and that's how you should be thinking about it. If you're going to add a piece of tech, if you're going to change your client experience, look at it through the lens of, can you take this and go down the street to a prospect, and is it powerful enough to, be
the door wide open?
Yeah. Be a relationship breaker. Right. And if that's the case, then you might have legs to start implementing some of the stuff or paying for the subscription.
Hashtag relationship breaker. It's getting written down.
Episode title just established.
Yeah. No, but I agree. That's how we should be looking at any of this, because it goes back to, what's that experience that our particular clients want to drive. So let's keep working this tech stack though, because I want to complete kind of the last part. Chris, you've talked about a couple things in here, but just CRM in general that you've seen that you like. I mean, we all hear the Salesforce, blah, blah, blah of the world, but what are you experiencing out there that really, takes things to the next level from that prospecting, lead gen, all that?
Yeah, I think it's always interesting because I feel like a CRM is only as good as the data you can get into your CRM. And that's a challenge, right? Because it's not just a new prospect relationship management tool, which is how most of us probably use CRMs today, right? Because then once we get the client onboarded, they move into AMS, and then that's kind of where they live. And there's this kind of decoupling to a degree of that sort of experience management piece. So I think that's always an interesting challenge to overcome. And that's where, I think there's bits and pieces of CRMs out there that that capture, elements of that, kind of say broader Salesforce experience, but with a little bit more data included. You guys are aware of Enable. I kind of include them in a CRM to a degree, a part of what they do, and mostly because of what it does in terms of helping a producer cross-reference his book, identify where there's opportunities to, to cross-sell, to go out and get in front of clients that, don't have X, Y, or Z. So I love what they're doing on that front. To be honest, and I don't know if, again, they probably wouldn't classify themselves as a CRM. I think that's probably extraordinarily unfair to them to just put them in that little box.
They have a CRM-esque feature though to them and what they can do from a data perspective. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I honestly, that's probably pretty high on my list. Again, just for what they can do with the data to help a producer go out and be more effective on an existing book in particular.
It's an interesting spin on it for sure. And like this, that is a conundrum for sure on the CRM perspective. And what I always encourage people to do, especially sales leaders, is if you're just requiring information to be entered into your CRM for management or, micromanagement, be worse, perspective, just to get data, just to get that's the only reason people aren't going to want to do it, right? Because they don't have value to them. So try to think of ways to incorporate, how can I get the data I need, but use it to provide value back to my team. So whether that's conversion rates and bringing resources to them on where we're falling off, or closing ratios, and we see that dip, and what are we doing differently that we shouldn't have, or niche marketing and what's working, like taking industries that you're really killing right now and going back to the team and saying, hey, use Enable to say, hey, here's 50 more prospects in this area. We're closing these 10% higher than anything else. Use that information or set up your CRM to gather that information so you can bring that back to your team. And that's what's going to make them want to enter more information into the CRM, right?
One other I'd plug, Elliot, then I'd ask you too. Actually, the borrowed time, I mentioned, it kind of blends ops and sales. They have a pretty slick kind of quote unquote CRM component on their piece that actually ties in well with Salesforce too. So there's probably two that come to mind that are quasi fit. How about you? What are you guys seeing from a CRM perspective?
Yeah, I mean, other than what you've mentioned, I don't know that there's any like specific. I know that, like, again, kind of depends on where you're at. But like Better Agency has some good CRM-esque, functions, particularly for those smaller mid-sized firms. But yeah, I mean, otherwise you just basically hear Salesforce, which HubSpot, again, if you're looking for some bigger build outs, are really good customizable systems. I know several people using HubSpot for a lot of that. So they're out there. There are some other that I'm not as familiar with that I've heard a lot about, though, like Insurtech and, some of those that I think are doing some cool stuff. So all ones to certainly check out, have different, focuses, and depending on what you want to get. And again, that's something to be intentional about. Like, don't just go buy a CRM to get data or to track a pipeline, right? They're much more than that, and they can accomplish much more. If you want to have automated marketing, and freaking light turn back on.
There it is.
And you want to have automated marketing, or, just whatever you're trying to accomplish, go into it with that lens and figure out what problem you're trying to solve. So, but no, I think that kind of is a good spot to round up. We went backwards on this one, which is good, started the AMS side. So it's always entertaining when we have Mr. Chris Senkbile on.
A lot of rabbit trails to run down, boys. There it is.
We did pretty good. I think we did pretty good. So thanks for coming on, man. It was fun. Always a pleasure.
Yep.
Thanks for those out there listening, though. Check out Project Ferro. How can they get a hold of you guys, Chris, if they want to know more about what you're doing, Ferro?
Yeah, Chris at projectferro.com. You can always go check out the website at projectferro.com as well. And I'm happy to help out any way we can.
That's Ferro.
Thank you.
Well, so
we'll send you a $2 Venmo for the launch shout out.
Yeah, we got you. I'll send that your direction.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys.